It all started like a scene you've seen in countless movies. A seemingly ordinary man walks into a cafe, orders a simple cup of coffee, and ends up with his life completely overturned. But what happened to Jerry Hughes wasn't just any random act of fate. It was a moment that no one could have predicted. And it all began with a waitress' casual mockery that spiraled into something truly shocking. When Jerry, a quiet, middle-aged man, entered the cafe that morning, the staff barely gave him a second glance. He wasn't dressed in any expensive suits, no flashy jewelry to signal wealth, just a plain t-shirt and jeans. It was the sort of attire that made him blend in with the other patrons, all of whom were hustling to their daily lives, unaware of the storm that was about to erupt in their midst. The waitress, Tiffany, wasn't particularly impressed. Jerry wasn't even the first customer of the day. That honor went to a few young professionals who had already grumbled about their order taking too long. Tiffany, in a bit of a bad mood, had dealt with enough complaints. When Jerry took his seat and ordered his coffee, he was no different in her eyes. Just another slow morning patron. But then came the words that would set everything into motion. "You know," Jerry said softly, staring into his empty mug, "I'm not much of a fan of the whole corporate lifestyle." Tiffany raised an eyebrow. She'd heard it all before. Yet there was something about the way he said it. She snorted, almost as if trying to cover up her own frustration. "Yeah, tell that to the people in suits who come in here, thinking they own the place." Jerry didn't respond at first, simply taking a long, slow sip of his coffee. Tiffany, on the other hand, couldn't resist. "What do you do for a living then, if you hate all the corporate stuff?" "I invest," he replied, as if it were a simple answer. Tiffany chuckled, rolling her eyes. "Oh sure, you're an investor. What, are you some big Wall Street guy, or are you just another dreamer?" The words hit Jerry in a way Tiffany couldn't have known. He had heard them before. People like her never saw him for who he truly was. But this time, something felt different. Something about Tiffany's arrogance triggered a response deep within him. A few minutes later, the cafe was buzzing with the usual noise. The clink of silverware, the hiss of steam from the espresso machine, and the background hum of casual conversation. But Tiffany kept glancing at Jerry. There was something about him that didn't quite match the image she'd painted in her mind. Suddenly, Jerry stood up. "You know," he said, his voice much firmer now, "maybe I should tell you who I really am." The statement was strange enough to make Tiffany pause mid-laugh. She didn't think he was serious. But when he pulled out his phone and swiped through a few screens, her amused smile began to fade. She caught a glimpse of the screen: stock figures, portfolio listings, the unmistakable digital signature of a millionaire. Jerry wasn't just talking. He was showing her the numbers. "Take a look," he said, his voice quieter now. "I've been investing in tech startups, real estate, and hedge funds for years. My portfolio's worth tens of millions." Tiffany froze. The reality of what he was saying hit her harder than any insult could have. But before she could respond, Jerry was already slipping the phone back into his pocket. "Now," Jerry added, turning to leave, "you might want to be more careful next time. You never know who you're mocking." He left the cafe in a flash, leaving Tiffany standing there, staring at the empty seat where the man who had once been just another customer had sat. She blinked, her mind racing to make sense of it. Could he really be telling the truth? Over the next few hours, the incident gnawed at Tiffany. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Was it possible? Could that unassuming man really be one of the wealthiest investors she had ever crossed paths with? It didn't make sense. She'd seen him. The way he dressed, the way he carried himself. He didn't seem to fit the profile of a millionaire. But then it happened. Tiffany couldn't resist any longer. She decided to dig into Jerry's background. What she found wasn't just surprising, it was downright shocking. Jerry Hughes was the name attached to millions of dollars in investments. But what Tiffany didn't know was that his fortune had been made by a single risky bet. And that's where the story takes a dark turn. As Tiffany dug deeper, she uncovered a story of financial genius that bordered on madness. Jerry's rise to the top had come at a cost, a series of moral compromises and questionable decisions that had left a trail of broken partnerships, lost friends, and some whispers of criminal activities buried deep within his rise to success. It turned out that the millions he'd amassed weren't just from clean investments. There were rumors, whispers of fraud, insider trading, and more. But no one could ever prove it. Suddenly, Jerry's success felt less like a story of triumph and more like a ticking time bomb. Had he been hiding something far more sinister beneath the surface? Was his fortune built on shaky foundations? The deeper Tiffany dug, the more unsettling the truth became. And just when she thought she had it all figured out, a massive twist turned everything on its head. The authorities had been watching Jerry for years, quietly investigating his financial activities. But they had never been able to catch him in the act. Until now. Because Jerry Hughes wasn't just a millionaire investor. He was a man who had something to hide. And now, that secret was about to be exposed. But Tiffany wasn't done yet. She had one final card to play. A connection, an old acquaintance, who had been close to Jerry and knew the truth about his shady dealings. With the clock ticking, Tiffany prepared for the next phase of this roller coaster investigation. Would she expose Jerry's secrets to the world? Or would she be swept away by the tidal wave of lies and deception that had surrounded him for years? One thing was certain, the final reveal was coming, and it was going to shake everything to its core. As Tiffany prepared to confront Jerry with her newfound knowledge, she received an anonymous email that changed everything. You're digging in the wrong place. If you want the truth, follow the money, but you might not survive what you find. The suspense was just beginning. Tiffany stared at the email in disbelief. You're digging in the wrong place. Her mind raced as she reread the chilling message, her finger hovering over the screen. The sender was anonymous, but there was something about the tone that felt far too real. The warning wasn't just a threat, it felt like a promise. And the mention of follow the money wasn't lost on her. This wasn't just about exposing Jerry's lies. It was about something far deeper and far more dangerous. She sat back, her heart pounding in her chest. Everything she thought she knew about Jerry Hughes was now in question. The million-dollar investments, the expensive lifestyle, all of it seemed like a carefully constructed facade. But if she was on the wrong track, if this anonymous email held any truth, what was the real story? What was Jerry hiding? She couldn't afford to back down now. Tiffany had already made her decision. She was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter where it led her. As she started to dig deeper, she uncovered something disturbing. A shell company, hidden accounts, and what was worse, a connection to a high-profile financial scandal that had rocked Wall Street years ago. It was a scandal that had been largely forgotten by the public, but those in the know would never forget. Was Jerry involved? Her phone buzzed, snapping her back to reality. It was a message from an old friend, Ryan, someone who had worked with Jerry in the past. Ryan had a reputation for knowing things that most people wouldn't dare say out loud. Tiffany hesitated for a moment, then hit reply. Tiffany ***, I need to know everything you can about Jerry Hughes. No questions. It's urgent. The response came quickly. Ryan ***, you're in deep, aren't you? Alright, meet me at the usual place. You won't like what I have to say, but it's time you knew the truth. Tiffany felt a chill run down her spine. The usual place was a small, dimly lit bar at the edge of town, where Ryan had shared enough secrets to fill a dozen lifetimes. She didn't waste time. Hours later, Tiffany sat across from Ryan, the hum of the bar filling the background. He looked uneasy, his face drawn with a seriousness she rarely saw. He handed her a folder, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. He didn't need to say a word. She knew this wasn't just about Jerry anymore. This was about something far more dangerous. Look, Ryan started, his voice low, Jerry's made enemies. Big ones. And I'm not talking about some small-time rivals. There's money here. Big, dark money. You know the Myron Group. Tiffany froze. The Myron Group was one of the most notorious financial syndicates in the world, known for their ties to illegal operations, corrupt politicians, and money laundering schemes. The group was untouchable, its influence spanning multiple continents. Ryan continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Jerry's been funneling money through their network. Investments that were never about growing his wealth, but about hiding something. This isn't just business. This is organized crime. Tiffany's mind raced. She was right. Jerry's rise to the top had never been clean. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. Was Jerry really just another pawn in a larger game? Ryan slid a stack of papers across the table. These are transaction records, wire transfers, offshore accounts. This is where Jerry's real money comes from. He looked around nervously before adding, and there's more. He's involved in something much darker than just financial fraud. This goes all the way to the top. Tiffany flipped through the documents, her heart sinking with each page she turned. The connections were undeniable. Jerry's name was linked to massive sums of money, offshore accounts, and a network of powerful individuals. But it wasn't just about money. It was about control, power. And then, as she turned to the final page, her breath caught in her throat. There it was in black and white, Jerry's name, listed as a major investor in a covert operation. The operation had been shrouded in secrecy, but the papers laid out a grim reality. The operation involved the illegal trafficking of rare and valuable resources, a resource that had been under investigation by international law enforcement for years. Tiffany felt the weight of the truth settle over her. Jerry wasn't just a millionaire investor. He was a key player in a dangerous web of corruption, crime, and violence. The next morning, Tiffany couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. She knew she had to confront Jerry, but the fear gnawing at her insides was hard to ignore. What if he didn't let her walk away? What if he knew she was onto him? She arrived at his office building with a mix of fear and determination. Her plan was simple: get him to confess, expose everything, and then let the authorities take over. But as she walked past the security guards, she noticed something wasn't right. The building felt off. There was an unusual tension in the air, and the silence felt suffocating. When she reached Jerry's office, the door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped inside, her breath catching in her throat. The room was empty, and yet, the atmosphere was thick with something she couldn't quite place. Before she could process what was happening, the phone on Jerry's desk rang. Tiffany hesitated for a moment before picking it up. "Hello," she said, her voice trembling. A cold voice on the other end answered, "You've been digging in the wrong place, Tiffany. You've been warned." The line went dead. Tiffany's heart raced as the reality hit her. She was in over her head, and now there was no turning back. Cliffhanger for part 3 asterisk. Tiffany ran out of the building, her mind spinning, when a black car pulled up in front of her. The door opened and a man stepped out. He wasn't just any man. He was the one person she never expected to see, Jerry Hughes. And he wasn't alone. A chill ran down her spine as she realized this was the moment that would define everything. Would she make it out alive? Or was she about to enter a world far darker than she could imagine? The story was only just beginning. The door to the black car opened, and Jerry Hughes stepped out, his usual calm demeanor replaced with an intensity that sent chills down Tiffany's spine. Behind him were 2 large men, bodyguards, if she had to guess. They were silent, standing with a stillness that made it clear they were prepared for whatever might unfold next. Tiffany stood frozen, her heart racing. She couldn't escape. She couldn't run. The street was empty, and there was no one around to help. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, she felt the weight of her investigation pressing down on her like a vice. She had been chasing a story, but now it was chasing her. Jerry smiled, but it was a cold, calculating smile. "I figured it was only a matter of time before you'd find out," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "I never expected you to dig this deep, but here we are." Tiffany swallowed hard, her mind spinning. You're involved in everything, aren't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Myron Group, the trafficking, everything." Jerry didn't flinch. "You don't know the half of it, Tiffany," he replied, his tone shifting. "This isn't just about money. It's about power. The things I've built, you have no idea the forces at play." Tiffany took a step back, her instincts telling her to run. But something inside her pushed her forward. She couldn't let him win. Not after everything. "What is it that you really want, Jerry?" she asked, her voice more steady now. "Why lead me down this path?" Jerry's eyes narrowed. "I don't want anything from you, Tiffany. I just wanted to make sure you understood one thing. You're out of your depth. You've crossed a line, and now there's no going back." Suddenly, the air around her seemed to grow thick, suffocating. She could hear her own breath in her ears, the sound of her pulse hammering in her chest. The bodyguards didn't move, but they watched her with cold, predatory eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "Why drag me into this mess? You have everything. Power, money. Why ruin other lives?" Jerry took a step toward her, his eyes darkening. "Because, Tiffany, the world doesn't work like you think it does. It's not about right or wrong. It's about survival. And those who don't play by the rules, well, they don't last long." He paused, his lips curling into a smirk. "You should have stayed out of it, but now you're a part of the game. You're too close, and you won't make it out unscathed." Tiffany's mind raced. She had to think fast. The truth was out there. People would believe her if she could just escape and get the evidence to the right hands. But Jerry wasn't just going to let her walk away. Before she could react, the sound of a car engine roared in the distance. Tires screeched as a second black vehicle appeared, sliding to a stop beside them. The door opened and a man stepped out. He wasn't one of Jerry's bodyguards. This man was different. Taller, broader, his movements sharp and deliberate. He had an air of authority about him that made Jerry's confident facade falter. The man locked eyes with Jerry, then turned to Tiffany. "I think it's time we had a chat, Miss Tiffany." Tiffany's mind screamed at her to run. But before she could move, the bodyguards were on her, gripping her arms with surprising strength. She fought back, but it was no use. They were too strong, too prepared. Jerry watched her with an emotion she couldn't quite read. Pity? Disdain? It didn't matter. He wasn't going to let her leave. Not now, not when she was so close to exposing everything. "I told you," Jerry said, his voice almost regretful. "You should have stayed away." The tall man stepped forward, his expression cold and businesslike. "Take her." Tiffany was shoved into the back seat of the second car, her heart pounding in her chest. As the car sped off, she realized just how deep she was now. She wasn't just dealing with Jerry anymore. She was in the middle of something far bigger, something she wasn't sure she could survive. As the car wound its way through darkened streets, Tiffany thought back to the moment she'd first walked into that cafe. If only she had known. If only she had seen what Jerry was truly capable of. Now, there was no turning back. Minutes passed before the car finally stopped. The doors opened, and Tiffany was pulled out roughly. She was brought into a building, the interior as cold and clinical as the men who surrounded her. The tall man remained at her side, his presence like a shadow she couldn't shake. "This is where it ends, Tiffany," Jerry's voice echoed from behind her. He was standing in a doorway, his figure silhouetted by the dim light. Tiffany didn't respond. Her mind was already racing for a way out. This couldn't be the end. She refused to let it be. She had the evidence. She had the truth. But she needed to get it out. Before she could think of her next move, Jerry's voice cut through the air. "The truth you think you know, Tiffany? It's already too late. The people at the top? They're untouchable. And you? You're just a casualty." Tiffany took a deep breath, locking eyes with him. She wasn't ready to give up yet. We'll see about that. As the men closed in, the sound of sirens echoed through the night. The distant wail grew louder, but Tiffany wasn't sure if it was her salvation or her doom. In that moment, everything could go either way. Was this the beginning of the end? Or could the sirens be a sign of a new fight? The sirens grew louder, closer, piercing the thick tension in the air. Tiffany's heart raced. Was it the authorities? Had they tracked her down? Or was this just another play by Jerry to keep her contained? Her mind was a blur of confusion, but one thing was clear: she couldn't let this moment slip away. She needed to act fast. The men who had surrounded her looked momentarily distracted, their attention shifting toward the approaching sound of sirens. For a split second, Tiffany felt a spark of hope. This was her chance. She could escape, find a way to alert the authorities, and expose everything Jerry had worked so hard to conceal. But before she could make her move, Jerry's cold voice sliced through the air again. "You think you're the first person to try and take me down?" His tone was low, mocking. "I've made deals with people far beyond your reach. You're nothing more than a pawn in a game you don't understand." Tiffany didn't look at him. She focused on the sound of the sirens, now so close that they rattled the windows. The sirens were real. Someone was coming. "Time's up," Jerry added, stepping forward. "It's too late for you, and it's too late for your little investigation." Suddenly, the door to the building burst open, and armed officers stormed in, their guns drawn. Tiffany froze. For a moment, it felt like a dream. Were they here for her? Was this the moment her fight for justice finally paid off? The officers moved with precision, taking the men surrounding Tiffany by surprise. They shouted commands, their voices sharp and commanding. Tiffany didn't know who had called them, but she wasn't about to question it. The tall man lunged toward one of the officers, but before he could strike, he was tackled to the ground. Other officers quickly subdued the remaining guards, their training taking over in a way that was both quick and decisive. Jerry's face twisted into a mask of anger. "You can't do this," he spat, trying to break free from the officers holding him. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." But it was too late. The officers had Jerry in cuffs, his threats falling on deaf ears. One of them, a tall officer with a steely gaze, turned to Tiffany. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice calm but urgent. Tiffany nodded, still in shock. "I think so. But Jerry Hughes, he's involved in more than just financial fraud. You need to check his connections. He's tied to the Myron Group. There's money laundering, trafficking, it's all there." The officer didn't respond immediately, but he nodded as if he had already known. "We're aware. We've been watching him for months. But you did the right thing. You stayed with it." Tiffany felt a weight lift off her chest. The truth was finally coming to light, and Jerry's empire of lies was starting to crumble. But just as she began to breathe easier, another officer approached her, a grim look on his face. "We've got a problem," he said, holding up his phone. Tiffany's heart sank as she saw the message on the screen. "The Myron Group, they're already on their way." Tiffany's breath caught in her throat. Jerry's web of influence wasn't over yet. The fight wasn't over. She had exposed one part of his empire, but now the true scale of his criminal network was about to be revealed. The officer looked at her with determination. "We'll handle it from here, but you need to leave. This is bigger than anything you've seen. Trust us, we'll protect you." Tiffany stood there for a moment, her mind racing. Everything had changed. What had started as a simple cafe encounter had spiraled into a global conspiracy that threatened not only her life but countless others. But she knew one thing: she wasn't going to stop. She couldn't stop. The story was too big, the truth too important. As the officers led Jerry away in handcuffs, Tiffany took one last look at the scene. The sirens were fading, but the danger was far from over. And as much as she wanted to put it all behind her, she knew there was still work to do. Weeks later, the news exploded with reports about Jerry Hughes' arrest, the Myron Group's criminal ties, and the uncovering of an international network of illegal activities. Tiffany became a key witness in the investigation, her bravery and persistence helping to bring down one of the most dangerous financial syndicates in the world. But the consequences were far-reaching. Jerry's empire had left behind a trail of destruction, and the ripples of his actions were felt across multiple industries. The fight for justice had only just begun. And Tiffany knew this. No matter how deep the corruption ran, no matter how dangerous the people involved, she would always fight for the truth. The story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The end.